So we're in Romans 12. Romans 12, and tonight I'm going to be doing just a few verses really, from verse 9 through to verse 13. So just those few verses. So I'll, Matthew, with your newly restored Bible, would you mind doing the honours? Verse 9 through and to including verse 13, please.
Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honour preferring one another. Not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer, distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a bit like a list, isn't it, really? It has a list-like quality to it. So I'm probably going to just really just go through it as like a list, you know, and just talk about each element as we go through. The first one's quite interesting, verse 9, because it's a word that we perhaps wouldn't use very often. Let love be without dissimulation. Dissimulation is really hypocrisy, or at the very least insincerity. And this is fascinating, really, because a lot of churches, and you know, I've been a Christian for a long time now, a lot of churches really build on the idea of insincere love, getting people to do things that seems to express the love of God, you know, because you're meant to be seen to be loving. So let's orchestrate something that will do that. And so I thought I'd just share with you, apologies by the way if you've heard this before, a sort of scenario that I found myself in as a young Christian that I think is classic love with dissimulation, if you like. And it was when I was as a young Christian, and we had a woman speaker came to the church that I was at, and she said, right, I want to do something a bit different. And she said, can everybody get into pairs, but if you're married, make sure it's not with your husband or your wife. So straight away, everybody's thinking, oh no, what's going to happen? So you know what happens? It's not your husband, not your wife. So all the women choose other women, and all the men pick a man. So I think, oh, okay. So then she says, right, I want you to stand facing your partner. So you stand, and she said, I want you to look them in the eyes. So you're looking in the eyes of this person. She says, I want you to extend your hands and hold the other person's hands. So I don't know how comfortable the women were doing it, but you can imagine how men were feeling at this time. But it's about to get a whole lot worse. She then says, what I want you to do is to look the person in the eye and sing to them, I love you with the love of the Lord. And so you can. I mean, if I'm trying to put you in the place to picture what this is like, a classic case of enforced love with dissimulation, insincere love. So how are we to show it then? Well, Paul tells us how we're to be loving without this dissimulation, this insincerity. He says, be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love, in honour preferring one another, or if you like, esteeming one another higher than yourself. That's how you show love without dissimulation. It's not all about hugging people or, you know, oh precious, oh you're precious to me, I really love you, and all those kind of things. I've seen all that, and it's absolutely not a reflection of love. What real love is being kindly affectionate towards others, expressing brotherly love, and preferring others. Now, in this whole section here, we have a number of statements by Paul that we might call practical Christianity. It's about, Matthew said the other week, you know, theology bit's over for the most part, and now it's about this is what you do, this is how you to live. In fact, I would it comes, I think, under the heading of applied theology or practical Christianity, and I would say it's basically Paul is saying, don't do this, do this, and do this in various kind of ways. Sometimes there's three things that are mentioned, sometimes it just seems to be two, but it really seems to be that basic. And so in verse 9 it's let love be without dissimulation, abhor that which is evil, and cleave to that which is good. So cleave, interesting word. In the sort of King James version, it's an older English, it's a Middle English word that comes from an older German word, kleben. When you think of cleave, sometimes people think of chopping something up with a cleaver. It doesn't mean that. It means kleben is the German means to stick to or adhere to. But it has a wider meaning than that. It's quite interesting. It can also mean to be faithful to. So it can mean to actually be stuck to something, but also to be faithful. And so that's what Paul is saying, is to be faithful to that which is good, not to allow yourself to be pulled away from it, but it's a heartfelt faithfulness and a determination to surrender to that faithfulness. I'm going to be faithful to this. I'm going to stick to that which is good. And how do you do that? By abhorring that which is evil. Not by making excuses for that which is evil. Well, I'm really trying, and but to actually abhor it, to be repulsed by it, to hate it. So this, again, where's that book? Give me that book, Bradley. It is. There we go. It's these are radical things. Abhor that which is evil, and cleave to that which is good. So we're to be faithful in our actions, but also faithful in our hearts towards the Lord. It's what we call in Wesleyan terms outward and inward holiness. That's really what it's talking about, obedience to the Lord. But it's not just an outward thing, it's not just singing to somebody, it's from the heart. I really care about this person from the heart. It's not just an outward act that I do. This brotherly love that Paul talks about in verse 10 is the Greek Philadelphia, a fraternal love, a love of the brethren. And again, it's expressed in the same way, in honour, preferring one another. Now, this is interesting because it ties in with some of the other things that we were looking at last week. In fact, let's just go. If you go down a little bit further, you can see in verse 16 it says, "Be of the same mind one toward another, mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits." And last week we looked at verse 3 that said not to think of yourself more highly than you ought. All these verses come together really to build up a picture of what Paul is describing as the Christian's attitude to others, is that he doesn't think that he's better than everybody else, but rather he's esteeming or honouring others more highly than himself, and he is preferring them to himself. So it's saying to condescend to men of low estate. Don't be proud, don't be stuck up, don't be snobbish, but be willing to mix with people, all different types of people. Because in churches, as you know, it brings together all different sorts of people, all different social classes, all different levels of intelligence, all different backgrounds, and now particularly in the UK, people from different nationalities and different cultures. Got a whole load of different, we've got to stop using the word different, a whole load of varied cultural background with them. And I think it's great personally, and you need to be able to mix with them. And don't just say, well, I'll find the people who are the most like me and believe what I believe, and I'll just stick with them, because that's how factions form. That's how little cliques form. And I've even been at churches where it's been like that. Here's the dispensationalist table, here's the whatever table. This is what happens. And I am very grateful before I guess it's a good few years ago now, the Lord led us to a brethren church. Now, we had never been to a brethren church, none of us were from a brethren background or anything like that, but I felt the Lord was searching for a church, was go to this one. And I knew a bit about them, but and I even knew some of the people who went there, but I didn't really know much about what was involved in their services. And so what they did was once a month they had what they called fellowship meetings, and other brethren assemblies, they would call them, around the country, around the northwest, would all come together, they'd all meet together, and the men, because the women aren't allowed to speak, but the men would discuss various things about the Bible, and anybody could just get up and you could give your opinion, you see, about whatever passage of scripture was being studied. And so I got up and gave my opinion, but I was probably the only non-dispensationalist, non-once saved, always saved, that they'd never really encountered anybody, because nobody ever really wants to go to a brethren church apart from people who are brought up in it. It doesn't really have much appeal to other people. And so they encountered, me, someone with completely different views to them, and I encountered, their position, and it was really useful for me to hear, and many of them were very intelligent and very well versed in the scriptures. So it's great to have that debate with a group of people that I wouldn't otherwise, have met. And I think it's so important that we are able to discuss and talk with people with different theological points of view, because otherwise you know what's that phrase they use? In the world of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. You can be in a little church somewhere and you think, oh my goodness, I know more than anybody else here. But you come out of that environment into another kind of church, or you meet another kind of Christian, suddenly you think, hang on, how come they know all this stuff that I don't know? Well, because you've just been in this little group, this little sect, and you've not seen the full picture. So I think it's important. And it's important that we speak to all sorts of different people that might come to the church, different backgrounds, different classes, and get to know them. And my top tip would be, if there's someone at church whom you've never spoken to, maybe the sort of person that you think, well, I'd never get on with them, why not genuinely make the effort and go and get to know them? Get to understand what they believe and why they believe it. It's good just to get in there, get and talk to them and find out about the person. So that's what I think is part of being kindly affectionate one to another, with brotherly love, and in honour preferring one another. So verse 11 says, not slothful or not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Let's have a look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And verse 31. Whether therefore ye eat or drink, and this is it, or whatsoever ye do, do all to the glory of God. Do all to the glory of God. Let's compare that with Colossians. Sort of similar words. Colossians 3. And verse 23. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. I think probably the last one there is the closest really to what Paul is saying here in Romans 12, is to be fervent in spirit, or to do your job heartily, whatever your job is, even if it's just housework, but to do it heartily, not as to men, not as if you're working for a man, but as unto the Lord. And so I get a bit kind of I see these, you get some of these Christian magazines, if you've ever seen, when you get to the back pages, it's got special deals and stuff. Like, I remember seeing one, and it was second-hand cars, Christian garage or whatever, second-hand cars, pastors, special discount, 10% off. And you just think, why? And I guess they would say, oh, well, because he's doing the work of the Lord. Yeah, but you're doing the work of the Lord. You're doing the work of the Lord. If you're doing your job as unto the Lord, heartily and not before men, are you not doing worship to God? Yeah. So I don't like it when I see things like that, because I think it shows a misunderstanding, really, of what the scriptures are saying, which is, it's not your secular job and then church. Church is for God, and here's my secular. No, God is with you all the time if you're a Christian, and the way in which you act, and in which you present yourself, and which you interact with others, has to be as if the Lord is there watching you doing it. You can't be utterly cutthroat, ruthless in business, and then in church on Sunday morning raising your hand. It's no good. You have to bring the moral principles that you have in church with you into your business life, and into your interaction with others. You must stand on those principles all through your life, in every kind of scenario that you enter into. So you're not actually serving men, but you're serving the Lord. Verse 12 says that Christians must rejoice in hope. Now, Paul in verse 6 emphasized faith. Remember that we spoke about the importance of faith. And now here in verse 10, he speaks about love. And now in verse 12, he speaks about hope. So we have three important Christian virtues: faith, hope, and love, or charity, as the King James puts it. These are the virtues that Paul says abide or remain in 1 Corinthians 13. So I just quite like the way that Paul brings that together in this section, in this chapter anyway. So we are to be patient in tribulation, in times of trouble. In fact, Peter says, doesn't he, this patience that you have when you're going through these fiery trials, through these difficult times, it's actually having an effect on your faith. If you're patient, your faith will come forth. It will be like gold. It's like when they heat up that gold, molten gold, that all the dross, which is the correct term, isn't it, floats to the top. All the impurities come up to the top, and you can scrape them off, and what you're left with is that which is pure gold. There's no impurity in it. And what you find when you go through times of trial, times of tribulation, all the bad parts of your character that you thought had gone, all the worst parts of you seem to come to the surface. They seem to appear, but that's so that God can deal with them. And what you'll be left with, if you allow him to deal with those things, is you'll be left with a faith that has grown. And it's amazing. It's amazing if you go through the tribulation, your personal tribulation, with the right attitude toward God and toward the thing you're going through, you can mature quite considerably in a short space of time. It's about dealing with that problem in the right way. We don't always do that. because our flesh gets in the way. But if you allow that tribulation to have its work, then you can really grow as a Christian. You can really mature. So we're told also, as we're going through this tribulation, to continue. The phrase that is used here is instant in prayer. Instant in prayer. It's an odd word, a Greek word, proskartereo, I think I pronounced that correct, to attend carefully, diligently, constantly, closely, earnestly. You get the idea? So prayer is an absolute priority. And if you're going through tribulation, in many times it will drive you to prayer, because you try everything you can, you pull all the strings you can, you respond in your flesh, it doesn't work, and then you are driven to prayer. It's quite often why God allows it, is to get you into the prayer closet and start seeking with God. And it's saying to do it constantly. Let's have a look at James chapter 1. James 1, let's. What I wanted to say about this was the next part of Romans. Really, I've moved on too quickly there, but the next part of Romans is. So I can edit this bit out, and you won't even know that I did this. But if we go back to Romans 12, I want to read verse 13 there. It talks about distributing the necessity of saints and given to hospitality. So remember, these are instructions. It's like a list that Paul's giving you. These are the things you need to attend to. Distributing to the necessity of the saints. And this is what it reminded me of James 1:27, where James describes pure religion. And again, we were talking about that dross being scraped off, getting down to what's pure, what's real religion. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So, yes, it's about holiness, but it's about something else as well. And it's about a practical kind of Christianity, showing that we care by dealing with people's issues and problems. And in fact, James goes on to say, in chapter 2, some very strong words. Verse 15. If a brother or sister, well, he's talking about a brother or sister in the faith, talking about showing brotherly love. If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, be ye warm and filled, or I love you with the love of the Lord. I added that bit in. Notwithstanding, ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? What good is it if you're not actually helping them with what their need is? Well, the Apostle John puts it even stronger. If you go to 1 John, let me see, 1 John 3. First John 3 and verse 16. Hereby perceive we the love of God. In other words, this is how we know the love of God, because he laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoso hath this world's good, so there you are, you've got clothes, you've got money, you've got all this stuff, and he seeth his brother have need, and he shutteth up his bowels of compassion. Great old King James word there. Bowels is, that phrase, in the bowels of the earth. It means in the very, very centre of the earth. Well, bowels of compassion, we would say heart, your heart. In other words, right in the very centre of you, where your affection comes from, where your love comes from, out of your heart. If he sees his brother have need and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? So that's massive, isn't it? That's like saying, if you see someone in your church in need, and you can meet that need, and you, if you like, harden your heart against it and say, oh, well, I need to get back home, really. I might pray about it. In fact, I might say, God bless you. Next time I see you, may the Lord bless you. If you shut your heart up, John is saying, how can the love of God be in that person? So a direct link between how we regard those who are in need, that we are in fellowship with. It could be, again, money raises its ugly head, but it could be that God wants you to be involved in distributing to the necessity of the saints. Or, it could be that you need to let a little bit of that pride go and say, I'm in need. I need something. It's about leveling it. It's about being real and honest with one another. It's about honouring and esteeming others above our own desires and the wants of our own flesh. It is about, to use Paul's phrase, love without dissimulation, love without insincerity, without hypocrisy. And that's what James is talking about, that's what John's talking about, and that's what Paul is talking about in this passage. Be a real church. If people are in need and you've got the stuff, meet that need. If you're in need, go to the brethren and say, can you help me? That, none of this kind of like, you meet the same person every Sunday morning, you don't know the name, you know nothing about them, you don't know where they live, you don't know if they're saved, but you always say hi to them. That's not New Testament church. That's something weird that I don't want to be involved in. That's religion, Let's not be that kind of church. I was going to say jumble say holding church, but let's not be that kind of church.